Abraha the Abyssinian was a man with a remarkable story. When he saw that all people were traveling to perform pilgrimage to the Kaaba, the sacred house of Allah, he could not accept it and was not pleased with it. He tried to turn people away from the Kaaba, but he was unable to do so. So he decided to build a huge and magnificent church so that people would travel to it instead. But that poor man did not realize that this Kaaba was not just any building. This Kaaba was built by the command of Allah Almighty, built by the Prophet Ibrahim to be the first house established for the worship of Allah. Abraha became furious, so he built a great and massive church called Al-Qulays. When he completed this structure, something the like of which had never been built, he sent a message to the Negus, the king who ruled that land, saying, "O king, I have built for you a church the like of which no king has ever had built before, and I will call the people to make pilgrimage to it." And indeed, he sent messengers throughout the lands, ordering people to perform pilgrimage to this church. In every valley, in every village, and in every city, he sent someone calling the people to come and visit it. Prophet Ibrahim had no one with him, yet he stood alone in Makkah and called people to pilgrimage. And Allah Almighty made his call reach the people, and even the souls in the wombs, for thousands of years until this very day. And people continued to perform pilgrimage to the Kaaba. But that man, known as Abraha, built a church and sent people to call others to pilgrimage to it, attempting to divert them away from the Kaaba. The Arabs became enraged by this, so one of them went to that church and entered it at night when no one was guarding it. He sneaked inside, and when he entered, he desecrated it, meaning he defiled it with filth and relieved himself inside the church out of hatred for Abraha and what he was doing to the Arabs and their religion. When this reached Abraha, he became furious. How could one of the common people, one of the Arabs, dare to defile the church he had built? His anger became intense, so he commanded his army that he was determined to demolish the Kaaba. How dare they? First, they refused to visit his church and instead go to the Kaaba, and then one of them dares to come and desecrate it. So news spread among the people that Abraha was determined to destroy the Kaaba. He mobilized his forces, assembled his armies, and prepared for that great act without realizing what consequences awaited him. Abraha set out with a massive and overwhelming army, heading toward Makkah to destroy the Kaaba. When the Arab tribes heard of this, a man from the kings of Yemen named Du Nafar rose against him. Some tribes gathered with him to resist Abraha and his army, but Abraha defeated them, overcame them, and captured Du Nafar. Du Nafar said to him, "O Abraha, do not kill me. Perhaps I may be of more benefit to you alive than dead. Keep me with you." So Abraha had him tightly bound and imprisoned, and continued his march north through the Arabian Peninsula, heading toward Makkah. Abraha then camped in a place called Qatham, where Nufail al-Qathama rose against him and gathered some tribes to resist Abraha. The Arabs would never accept anyone approaching Makkah or attempting anything against the Kaaba. So Nufail al-Qathami and the tribes with him confronted Abraha. But Abraha defeated him as well and seized him, intending to kill him. Nufail said, "Do not kill me. Perhaps I can guide you to Makkah, and these tribes will listen to you and obey you." So Abraha captured him as well. Abraha continued with his army until he reached Thaqif. When he arrived, the people of Thaqif came out to him and pledged loyalty. They said, "We are your servants, and you have upon us full obedience. We will listen and obey. And this house that we have is not the Kaaba. Rather, it is the house of Allah, which was an idol that used to be worshipped." They said, "If you wish, we will obey you, and we will send with you someone to guide you to the Kaaba and to Makkah." So Abraha spared them. They then sent with him a man named Abu Rikal as a guide. He led Abraha until they reached Makkah. On the way, they stopped in an area called Al-Mukamas. When they camped there, Allah sent his punishment upon Abu Rikal, and he died. The Arabs used to stone his grave because he had guided Abraha to Makkah. After that, Abraha sent a man named Al-Aswad ibn Maksud to Makkah to gather information and scout the situation. He went out with a group of horsemen. When he reached Makkah, he seized some of their wealth and took 200 camels belonging to the leader of Quraysh and their chief, Abd al-Muttalib ibn Hashim. He brought the camels back to Abraha. Then the tribes of Hudhail, Kinana, and Quraysh gathered, intending to fight Abraha. But when they realized the strength of his army and the magnitude of his forces, they withdrew, and no one was able to stand against Abraha in battle. As for Abraha, he sent a man named Hanata al-Himyari to Quraysh. He said to them, "I do not want war with you, nor do I desire to shed your blood. I have only come to destroy the Kaaba, so leave me alone with it." Hanata al-Himyari went to Quraysh and asked about their leader, Abd al-Muttalib. He sat with him and informed him of the message. Abd al-Muttalib replied, "We have no desire to fight Abraha. As for this house, we will leave it between Abraha and it." Hanata then said, "He wishes to speak to you." So Abd al-Muttalib went out and headed toward Abraha's camp. When he entered, the first person he asked about was a man named Du-Nafar, who had been captured, and Du-Nafar was a friend of Abd al-Muttalib. He sat with him and said, "O Du-Nafar, is there any way you can intercede for us with Abraha?" Du-Nafar replied, "What benefit can a prisoner like me bring? What can I do? I am a captive man. He may kill me today or tomorrow, but I have a friend who is the handler of the elephant." Abraha had brought an elephant with him, and its handler was a man named Unais. Du-Nafar said, "I will speak to him so that he may intercede for you with Abraha." So Du-Nafar went to the elephant's handler and told him, "Abd al-Muttalib is a noble man among his people. He feeds the poor and the needy in the valleys and in the mountains. Intercede for him with Abraha." Unais went to Abraha and informed him, saying, "The leader of Quraysh wishes to speak to you. He is a man who feeds the people in the valleys and in the mountains, and he wishes to enter upon you." So Abraha gave permission for Abd al-Muttalib to enter. Abd al-Muttalib entered Abraha's tent. Abraha was seated on a luxurious throne, surrounded by his attendants. When Abraha saw Abd al-Muttalib, he was impressed by him and held him in great respect. Abraha disliked the idea of remaining seated on the throne while Abd al-Muttalib sat on the ground on the carpet beneath him. So Abraha descended from his throne and sat on the carpet beside Abd al-Muttalib. Great dignity and awe surrounded Abd al-Muttalib. He was the chief of Quraysh and their leader. Between Abraha and Abd al-Muttalib, there was an interpreter, for neither of them understood the other's language. The interpreter said to Abd al-Muttalib, "Abraha asks you, what do you want?" Abd al-Muttalib replied, "I have 200 camels which your men have taken, and I asked the king to return them to me." The interpreter conveyed his request to Abraha. Abraha said to the interpreter, "When I first saw him, I admired him and gave him the respect he deserved. But when he asked me for what he asked, I lost all regard for him." Abd al-Muttalib said, "And why did you lose regard for me?" Abraha said, "You come to ask me for 200 camels, yet you leave a house which is your religion and the religion of your fathers and grandfathers, and you do not speak to me about it. You ask me for 200 camels while leaving a house that I have come to destroy." Abd al-Muttalib replied with his famous words, "I am the owner of the camels, and the house has an owner who will protect it." Abraha said, "And who will prevent me from the house?" Abd al-Muttalib replied, "That is between you and it. If he prevents you, then it is his matter, and our Lord, glorified and exalted, is able." So Abd al-Muttalib took back his camels and returned. He rushed to Quraysh and said to them, "Leave. This man is determined to destroy the Kaaba and violate the sacred sanctuary." So the people fled, escaping to the mountain peaks and the valleys, taking their women and children with them. They sought refuge in the mountains, calling upon Allah Almighty to protect his house and his sacred sanctuary. Meanwhile, Abd al-Muttalib stood at the Kaaba, holding onto its door ring, supplicating to Allah that he protect the Kaaba. Then he commanded the people to leave, and the people departed from Makkah. Makkah was emptied, and the Kaaba stood alone, surrounded by silence, awaiting the arrival of Abraha and his army. The people of Makkah spread out into the mountains. Quraysh, each clan, went with their families and children into the valleys and the mountain paths, calling upon Allah Almighty to protect his house and his sanctuary. The sacred mosque was left empty, and no one remained around the house of Allah Most High. On the morning of that day, Abraha set out after preparing his army to destroy the sacred house of Allah. With them was the elephant they had brought in order to demolish the Kaaba. The army marched toward the sanctuary, and among them was Nufail al-Qathami, who had been captured earlier. He knew the sanctity of the sacred precinct and the greatness of this holy land. So he approached the elephant and whispered into its ears, saying, kneel down, or return from where you came, rightly guided, for this is the sanctuary of Allah. This is the sanctuary of Allah." Then Nufail fled to the mountains along with the people of Quraysh, as they all watched what would happen to Abraha and his army. They were marching to destroy the sacred house of Allah, the first house established for mankind, the greatest place on earth. Abraha advanced with arrogance and pride, with his army and his elephant. But the elephant suddenly knelt down and refused to move. They tried to make it stand, but they could not. They beat it and shouted at it, yet it would not rise. They turned it toward Yemen, and it began to move. They turned it toward Ash-Sham, and it began to move. They turned it toward the east, and it began to move. But every time they directed it toward the Kaaba, it would kneel down and remain still, refusing to move from its place. Fear began to spread through the army. Why does this elephant move in every direction except toward the sacred house of Allah? What has happened? What is going on? Suddenly, the sky darkened. The people in the army looked up, even those watching from the mountains, and they saw enormous flocks covering the sky. Birds in swarms, Tehran Ababel, filling the heavens completely. Abraha and his army were struck with terror. What are these birds? Why have they come in such huge numbers? Who sent them? Each bird carried a stone of baked clay in its beak, hard stones prepared to crush heads, and in its claws it carried 2 stones. And suddenly the sky began to rain. But what kind of rain? It was not rain of water, but a rain of stones falling down from the sky. The army began to fall, one after another, as the stones descended from the sky. Whoever attempted to flee was pursued by the birds, and they struck him with stones until he was destroyed. Now Abraha himself began to collapse. His army scattered, fleeing in every direction. The people of Makkah watched from the mountains, calling upon Allah to save them and to protect the Kaaba. Abraha fled from that battlefield, not knowing where escape could be found. Some of his soldiers fled, some were killed, and some perished on the spot, until Abraha himself, while fleeing back toward his land, began to fall apart little by little. His fingers began to drop from his hands, and his body started to disintegrate. And when he finally reached his homeland, he collapsed and died. Allah Almighty destroyed Abraha and his army, and whoever survived became a lesson for those who remained. Thus, Allah Almighty utterly destroyed Abraha and his forces. This event was a clear sign and a lesson for the people of Makkah and those around them, so they would realize the sanctity of this house which Allah honored. Allah Almighty protected the sacred sanctuary and its people, even though the nations and villages around them were struck by destruction and ruin. But Makkah, the sanctuary, was preserved, for Allah Almighty protects it. Allah says, "Have they not seen that we made Makkah a safe sanctuary while people are being taken away all around them? Then in falsehood do they believe, and in the favor of Allah do they disbelieve?" The leader of Makkah, Abd al-Muttalib ibn Hashim, had 10 sons and 6 daughters. He made a vow, if Allah Almighty granted him 10 sons who would support and assist him, he would sacrifice one of them to the idols. Look at how Shaitan led them to such a vow, vowing to the idols that he would slaughter one of his own children. This is a great tragedy and a terrible disaster. that a person would slaughter his own son as an offering to false gods. And indeed, Allah granted him 10 sons, among them Hamza, Al-Abbas, Abu Lahab, Abu Talib, Dirar, Al-Harith, Az-Zubair, and the youngest of them was named Abdullah. He also had 6 daughters, among them Safiya, Atika, Arwa, Umayma, and others. When his sons reached 10 in number, Abd al-Muttalib gathered them and said, "O my sons, I have made a vow that I will slaughter one of you for the idols." Imagine this. He tells his sons that he will sacrifice one of them, whichever one the lot falls upon, as an offering to the idols. As for the sons, they all agreed to their father's vow and said, "Do what you have been commanded, do what you wish." This event resembles what happened with Prophet Ibrahim, but Prophet Ibrahim was commanded by Allah Almighty, while Abd al-Muttalib had made a vow to the idols. Shaitan was the one who inspired him. So the 10 sons gathered, and Abd al-Muttalib told each of them to write his name on an arrow and take it into the Kaaba. Inside the Kaaba there was an idol called Hubal, and by this idol were the divining arrows. There was also a man known as the Keeper of the Arrows. Abd al-Muttalib entered and informed him of his vow, and that he intended to sacrifice one of his sons. Each son presented his arrow to Hubal and to the Keeper of the Arrows, who cast the lots. And upon whom did the lot fall? It fell upon the youngest son of Abd al-Muttalib and the most beloved to him, Abdullah. Abd al-Muttalib was deeply saddened when the lot fell upon this son. He loved him, and he was the youngest of them. And during the casting of the arrows, Abd al-Muttalib was calling upon Hubal inside the Kaaba. When the matter was decided upon his son Abdullah, there was no escape except that he would fulfill his vow. He took a knife and dragged his son Abdullah to slaughter him. When the people of Quraysh saw this, they rose from their gatherings in shock and fear. They looked at Abd al-Muttalib and said, "What are you doing?" He replied, "I am fulfilling my vow." They said, "What vow is this?" He said, "I will slaughter Abdullah, for the lot fell upon him, and this is my vow." They said, "If you do this, people will continue to do what you are doing." So they insisted that he should not do it. But he said, "I will do it." And he continued walking, intending to slaughter his son. Then the nobles and leaders of Quraysh stood up and stopped him. They said, "Do not do this until you seek a solution." He said, "And how can I seek a solution?" They said, "There is a soothsayer in the Hijaz who has a follower, meaning a devil from the jinn. Go to her and ask her. If she commands you to slaughter your son, then do it. But if she gives you another instruction, follow it. If you do so, you will have an excuse. And if not, we will ransom him with all of our wealth." So, Abd al-Muttalib accepted their advice. He traveled with his son Abdullah and some men of Quraysh to the Hijaz, to the famous soothsayer, known to deal with the devils of the jinn. Throughout the journey, Abd al-Muttalib kept supplicating to his Lord to save his son Abdullah, for he loved him. When Abd al-Muttalib arrived, he entered upon the soothsayer and told her the story, describing the vow he had made and how the lot fell upon his son Abdullah. He asked, "What should I do?" The soothsayer said, "Leave now and come back tomorrow until my follower comes to me." So Abd al-Muttalib spent the entire night praying to Allah to save his son. In the morning, he went back to the soothsayer, hoping for his son's rescue. He said, "What do you say?" She replied, "What is the blood money for a killed person among you?" He said, 10 camels. She said, "Bring 10 camels and bring your son Abdullah, and cast the lots between them. If the lots fall upon Abdullah, then add 10 more camels and cast the lots again. Continue increasing by 10 until the lots fall upon the camels. If the lots fall upon the camels, then slaughter them, no matter how many they become, for your Lord has accepted." Meaning, if the lots fall upon the camels, then Allah has accepted this ransom and has spared your son. Abd al-Muttalib left the soothsayer filled with joy, rushing back to his people, for he had found a chance to save his son. He returned from the Hijaz with his son Abdullah and informed Quraysh of what the soothsayer had told him. He brought 10 camels and his son Abdullah, and the lots were cast. But the lots fell again upon his son Abdullah, meaning he must be slaughtered, so he brought 10 more camels, making them 20, and cast the lots again, but they fell upon Abdullah again. He continued increasing, 30, 40, until he reached 100 camels. Then the lots were cast again, and this time they fell upon the camels. The people rejoiced. His sons rejoiced. Quraysh rejoiced, believing that the idols had accepted 100 camels. But Abd al-Muttalib was not satisfied. They asked, "Why?" He said, "Not until I cast the lots again to make sure that the gods have truly accepted this." So he cast the lots a second time, and again they fell upon the camels. The people rejoiced. He said, "I will not be satisfied until I cast them a third time." So he cast the lots a third time, and once again they fell upon the camels. Thus Allah Almighty saved Abdullah ibn Abd al-Muttalib. Out of overwhelming joy, Abd al-Muttalib went to the leader of Banu Zuhrah, a man named Wahb ibn Abd Manaf, and said to him, "I wish to propose for your daughter Amina. She was among the noblest women in Makkah." He said, "For whom?" He replied, "For my son Abdullah." So Allah Almighty saved Abdullah ibn Abd al-Muttalib, and then he married him to the noble lady of Makkah, Amina bint Wahb. But the marriage did not last long. As soon as Amina bint Wahb became pregnant from her husband, Abdullah ibn Abd al-Muttalib, Allah decreed that Abdullah would pass away. Abdullah died and never saw his son from Amina. Such was the decree of Allah Almighty, to save this man so that he would marry this woman. And once she became pregnant, Allah took his soul.